Russia is booming. Despite being hit by a blitzkrieg of Western sanctions, its economy is actually thriving. But how? How can Russia, despite officially becoming the single most sanctioned nation on the planet, financially flourish? The answer is going to astonish you. Thursday, February 24th, 2022. Russian forces launch a special military operation into Ukraine. In mere hours, two massive sets of sanctions were imposed on Russia from the United States and the European Union. First, Russian banks were expelled from the international financial transaction platform known as SWIFT, the default financial transaction system for over 200 countries all over the world, a move which sought to cut Russia off from global monetary transactions and impair Russia's ability to engage in international trade. Secondly, the U.S. and the EU did what was otherwise unthinkable. They sanctioned Russia's central bank, seizing upwards of a $630 billion stockpile of international reserves that Russia had built up over the years, particularly its international gold funds. As such, the Russian Federation became the first G20 nation ever to have its central bank sanctioned. And yet, while the ruble was supposed to collapse under the weight of these sanctions, it didn't. In fact, quite the opposite. Ironically, the ruble actually hit a 7-year high. And despite all these sanctions, it became the single strongest currency in the world. Western elites were flabbergasted. The Associated Press responded with the headline, "Russia's ruble rebound raises questions of sanctions' impact." But what the Russian central bank did is they took swift action to raise interest rates to 20%. They froze foreign currency accounts. They restricted currency conversions, which helped keep foreign capital inside Russia, thus stabilizing its currency. Moreover, Russia in turn required all nations sanctioning them to pay for Russian exports, particularly fuel and fertilizer, in rubles. And those Russian exports have only gone through the roof. Despite initial concerns that Russia's ability to earn revenue from these commodities would be affected by the sanctions, the demand for Russian oil and gas skyrocketed, especially from non-sanctioning nations like China and India. The high prices of commodities further contributed to the strength of the ruble, all the while oil and gas trade hit an all-time high. Moreover, Russia has largely weaned itself off from SWIFT, the worldwide financial transaction system. After 30% of Russia's banks were expelled from SWIFT, Russian officials announced that they instead would be using China's alternative financial transaction platform known as KIPS as a substitute. Likewise, when Visa and MasterCard sanctioned Russia, Russians turned to their own credit card system known as the Ruski Mir, used all over the Russian world, which suddenly, obviously, surged in popularity, especially as it was linked up to China's Visa and MasterCard substitute, which is Union Pay system, which actually is substantially bigger than Visa and MasterCard. While inflation did increase in the Russian Federation, it remained relatively low as compared to the European Union, and Russia's unemployment rates have stayed relatively stable at record lows. But the real reason for Russia's booming economy is the most astonishing of all. Gang, did you know that we can actually use our elites' corruption against them? You know that companies like BlackRock have been bribing corrupt politicians like Nancy Pelosi with inside trading secrets for decades now. They know a whole host of inside baseball tips that gives them an unfair advantage when picking stocks. But did you know that thanks to a little-known SEC database, guess what? We can have access to those very secrets as well. We get to see what stocks these corporate CEOs are buying up in real time and then piggyback on their trades to gain the same advantage for ourselves that Pelosi and the crooks in D.C. have. My friend Ross Givens has been tracking insider trading for years, and his recommendations have led to investment returns of over 200%. Some have hit as high as nearly 1,500%. And according to him, there's simply no better way to beat the market. And now it's your turn. Click on that link below right now and learn how you too can learn to trade like Pelosi. Click on that link and learn how to gain an insider advantage for yourself today. As it turns out, one of the major reasons for why Russia's economy has proven so resilient is, of course, none other than President Vladimir Putin. Under Putin's leadership, Russia has largely decoupled itself from Western globalist structures, a strategy known as the Fortress Russia policy. Over the last several years, Russia has been intentionally seeking to sanction-proof their economy, and they've been doing this by building up their nation's international reserves away from the U.S. dollar and away from the British sterling, and they've been steadily increasing their economic alliance with China. They've created parallel structures within so as to be self-sufficient in terms of food, medicine, even IT, their internet technology. As such, Putin has been overseeing nothing less than the rise of a parallel world in Russia, what scholars are calling the first official civilization state. A civilization state is a totalizing political, economic, and cultural sphere that creates its own parallel economy, its own parallel currency, its own parallel arts and entertainment, its own parallel internet structures and telecommunications, its own parallel sports leagues, space travel, you name it. That is what Russia has been doing for the last decade. And the Russian population approves, and approves overwhelmingly. President Vladimir Putin's approval rating is the highest it's ever been. According to data compiled by the independent polling firm called Levada Center, Putin has an astonishing 83% approval rating. And so as it turns out, it's not just Putin's economy that's thriving. It's the whole of Russia's emerging civilizational state. And when all is said and done, from the way things look, bumbling Biden and the dolts in D.C., as well as the bullies in Brussels, were totally taken by surprise with all of this. They appear to have had no idea that over the last decade, Russia was busy building up a civilizational world that would ultimately affect its own emancipation from the globalist world order, and in effect, as we're seeing, institute its own parallel world. That is what's happening right before the world's very eyes, and that's precisely why the globalist attempt at canceling Russia has, in the end, completely backfired. Are you ready to join the resistance? Because I'm leading a group of dedicated, courageous patriots who can lead a spearhead into the heart of the secular globalist establishment. We punished Bud Light and Target, driven CNN and the legacy media to near bankruptcy, forced BlackRock to backtrack on ESG, and now we're seeing our conservative-dominated Supreme Court ending affirmative action and protecting religious liberty. In my Insiders Club, I show you concrete steps to take locally and online that will only keep this mass uprising going until the battle is won. Don't wait. Click the link in my description below and join my Courageous Patriots Insiders Club today.